The time is exactly 9:58 a.m. We're on to our final interview for the morning, and we are going to be talking with labor lawyer and mediator Patrick Deale. There is just so much we can talk with him about today, but because of time constraints, we'll pick on one or two issues that we believe is of importance. Patrick, a very good morning to you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Good morning to you.
Welcome. And I do apologize due to time constraints. We can only touch on one or two issues regarding the evolving landscape regarding labor law. So I
Sure.
guess
Okay.
the very important one for me anyway is the national, well, in fact they're all important, but let's start with the national minimum wage, balancing fair compensation and economic stability. It's fine and well to be talking about this. How does it get implemented, and who monitors this to see that it is, in fact, being implemented and being um, fairly run, so to speak?
Well, it is monitored by the Department of Labour. They do have inspectors and rights to enter premises. They've got quite a lot of rights actually to enter premises, to check, to do random checks about whether employers are complying with the minimum wage requirements in their particular sectors, if they're in the sectors that qualify, mainly sort of the lower end of wages in the agricultural sectors, for example, some elements of the retail section, security, and domestic environments as well. That's mainly where you see the majority of minimum wage employees. So they can enter those premises, they can call for records. If they get complaints from employees from those sectors, they can act on them and carry out inspections to make sure. But it's a big job because there's so many people involved, so many employers, individual employers involved, particularly in the domestic area, and small businesses as well. So it's very difficult to implement and to monitor.
And of course, I think employers do find big loopholes which they use to their advantage. We have a huge illegal immigration population in our country, and a lot of small employers are then tapping into that particular market because then they don't even reflect taxes, or possibly these employees aren't even being taxed. They probably earn a meager salary, a minimum wage. They stretched, in that area, and then there isn't even the taxes that are being paid over to the fiscus.
No question about that. You're absolutely right. So I think, effectively, I suppose you could call quite a large segment of informal employment almost that goes on below the radar, if you like, underground labor
Yeah.
relations or employment practices and so on. And I think it's very widespread. And often, desperate people take whatever they can. They don't complain because they think they do complain, they'll lose whatever they've got, and they'll be out on the fringe again. So marginalized workers or people, 8 or 9 million who are unemployed, are desperate to get the job, and unfortunately they are prone and vulnerable to exploitation by people. So it is a difficult balancing act, and very difficult to monitor and enforce, simply because of the huge number of employers and employment situations.
We're looking at a proposed increase of CPI at plus 3% from the 1st of March 2024. Would you know what the hourly rate, is expected to be, to increase from what amount to to get to the 3% amount?
In fact, the minimum wage is going to be increased by a little bit more, around about 8% this
Oh,
year,
wow.
2024. Yeah,
Yeah.
from 25 Rand 42 an hour to 27 Rand 58 cents an hour, which effectively works out to about 5,200 odd Rand a month. So that's really what the minimum wage is. is the minimum wage, but then you also have another threshold, which is the Basic Conditions of Employment Act. And the minimum threshold there is 241,000 Rand a year. And it's higher, much higher, obviously, than the minimum wage. And that is about 20,000 Rand a month. And those are for employees who are in more formal employment, but who qualify as vulnerable employees and more rights for protection in terms of the Labour Relations Act and other laws.
So, regarding these domestic workers that we're talking about, where the proposed increase would go up to 27 Rand plus per month, a lot of people I see are doing away with full-time domestic employee and rather hiring people on a 2 or a 3 day week basis. Are they then bound by labor laws, for example, to pay UIF and other services that they should provide to these 1, 2, or 3 days a week employees that they have?
Well, if they employ employees sort of for more than 2 days a week, then they must pay, they must comply. But if they don't, it's just casual labor, really.
Is that what it's called?
Yeah, it's pretty much, that's the sort of informal underground, if you like, labor sector that operates. And casual labor in and out one day, you see these, for example, on people going to collect people on street corners and people hungry for work, lining up and going up to, wait employers at certain sort of points. They seem to, created gathering levels, and the guy will go there with his bakkie, and they will run to the bakkie and get in and get paid for the day, and maybe the next day. And it's a sort of first come first served thing, and it's a cash payment system. There's no kind of real records or anything, and that's the informal casual labor. And I suspect it's huge. I don't know what size it is, but I'm sure it's enormous that it operates in. And so it's very difficult to, with a sea of unemployment and few jobs and small growth potential over the next few years, growth at less than 1%, it's hard to see the economic cake and expanding, and with it, the number of job opportunities. And I think this is going to continue for some time, despite the best efforts of the Labour Department to try and set in these minima and to try in enforce it. I think there's a flooding of need versus a drought of opportunity.
Absolutely. But at the same time, a lot of vulnerable people are being exploited. There is just so much more to cover, but I think we're going to have to get you another time on the show because we would like to look at the issues around the R2 system, pension funds. There's just so very much to cover, but I think let's not rush it and have you on the show another time. One thing that does jump out at me from the documents that I have here with me is point 10. It says Cannabis for Private Purposes Bill, rethinking substance use policies. Do you know anything about that?
Well, I think it's I suppose it's got to do with what to do about the distinction between private at home, and private means private, in your own space and not in the workplace. And that's the sort of the one thing of it. And also there's a difficulty at work around enforcement of an absolute rule against no smoking of cannabis, where if you are found with any trace of cannabis in your system, if there is a strict rule to say that even if we find a trace that you've smoked it or used it in some way, you can be instantly dismissed or immediately summarily dismissed. And the difficulty there is that how long the effects of cannabis smoking last. So you can, apparently the effects, if you smoke it in day one, the effects of it linger for 15 to 18 days and can be measured that much later. And you might be perfect to do your job because it's worn off.
Mm.
I mean, the hallucinogenic, mind altering to the extent that it exists has worn off long before then. Whereas in alcohol testing, the test was in 24 hours. And
Mm.
so that, I think there's a discrepancy there that they're trying to work out how do you measure the degree of intoxication in cannabis, which is proportionate to the effects of it, which is different from the intoxication of alcohol in relation to when you consume it. And I think there's some, thought about trying to get some measurements in there so that it sort of aligns with the rights of people to smoke it in their free time,
Mhm.
and not to be fired for having done it 2 weeks when they before when they get to work. That kind of thing. It's a bit of an anomaly there that needs to be
Yeah.
sorted out. For example.
Okay, Patrick, unfortunately, that's where we have to leave it. We have run out of time, but undoubtedly, we will talk sometime again in the future to unpack all of these issues regarding labor law and mediation. But thank you. I do appreciate your time. Go well.
My pleasure, Julie. All the best. Okay. Bye bye.
It is 9 after 10 o'clock, and that means it's time for me to wrap up. Thank you indeed to the producers, the technical producer, and the content producer, and that's you, Nasreen Naidu, and of course, Abdus Salam. Thank you for being with me. I'll be back next week, Monday at the same time. You will be joined by Salailo Makwadiri tomorrow. And of course, all I can say to you is have a great day. Take care on the roads. And till you and I meet again, Assalamu alaikum and Khudafiz.